Shalom, all praise to Yahweh Bashmi Shah, double line to the apostles GMS. This is Allah coming at you with part 2 of this show about the Hasmonean Dynasty. So let's continue on. Alright, the next part of this page, it says the result was the rise of the Hasmoneans. So now it's giving you the rise of the Hasmoneans, the rise of the Hasmonean Dynasty. The result was the rise of the Hasmoneans, a family of rural priests. Mattathias, it says, or Mattatyahu, a Jewish priest, and his 5 sons, Yohanan, or John, Yakanan, which means the gift, Shimeon, or Shemaiwan, he is heard of the power, he is heard of the Most High, Eleazar, which means he is helped of God, or help, Yohanathan, that's basically John, and Yohanathan is, Yohanathan basically like, given, like, Nathaniel means given by Yahweh. So Yohanathan will mean like he is given by Yahweh, or Jonathan. And Judah became the leaders of the traditionalist party. Matter of fact, let me look that up real quick. I just went to the book of, I just looked up Jonathan in the blue letter. It says right here, Yohanathan. I said he is given by the Most High, or Yahweh has given. And that was, I just looked it up in 1 Samuel 13:2. So let's go back. So it says the result was the rise of the Hasmoneans, a family of rural priests. Mattathias, or Mattatyahu, a Jewish priest, his 5 sons, Yohanan, Shemaiwan, or Shimeon, Eleazar, Jonathan, and Judah, became the leaders of the traditionalist party. Okay. The name of the dynasty Hasmonean is Greek, was said to derive from the name of the great-grandfather of Mattathias. However, it might derive from a Hebrew hapax used in Psalm 68:32. What's a hapax? Let's see what that is. It says, in corpus linguistics, a hapax legomenon is a word or an expression that occurs only once within a context, either in the written record of an entire language, in the works of an author, or in a single text. So it's a word that's or an expression that occurs only once within a context. But that's not really what we're trying to even go into. I'm gonna skip this part here because that's not what I'm trying to get to. Okay. All right. And I don't want to go into that because that's gonna make this, that's gonna go into a whole different topic. So I'm gonna keep going, and maybe I'll do another side lesson on that real quick. Maybe I'll do a side lesson on that when this whole part is done. In 164 BCE, let me see. I'll just read a little bit. It says using Psalm 68:32. Let's go to that. Psalm 68:32. Brothers, I'm not even gonna go into it. I was about to, not even. Let's just continue on with the point. In 164 BC, on Kislev 25, the anniversary of the day that the temple was desecrated. Temple was desecrated 3 years previously. The renovation of the house, Hanukkah, was celebrated for 8 days. Now, real quick, let me go up real quick. Before we go into that, let's go back up here. When I mentioned Mattathias and his sons, let's get that in the book of Maccabees. This is from artbible.info. This is 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1. In those days rose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin, or Modin. I believe that's how it's pronounced, Modin. And he had 5 sons, Johanan called Cadiz, Simon called Dasi, Judas who was called Maccabees, which means hammer. That means hammer. Eleazar called Avaron, and Jonathan whose surname was Apis. So it speaks about the sons right there that we just read on that last website. Now let's jump down to verse 49. This is First Maccabees chapter 2 verse 49. It says, now when the time drew near, because it's mentioned the father died, right? Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the law, and give yourselves for the covenant of your fathers. So be zealous to the law, have a strong desire for the law, and give yourselves for the covenant of your fathers, meaning die for the promises that was given to our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all our ancestors. Call to remembrance when acts our fathers did in their time. Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time. So shall you receive great honor and an everlasting name. So call to what? Remembrance. How they stood boldly, stood stiffly for the word, stood stiffly to obey the ordinance that the Most High have laid down. Okay, let's jump down to 66th verse. Okay. As for Judas Maccabees, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain, and fight for the battle of the people. Take also unto you all those that observe the law, and avenge ye the wrong of your people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed to the commandments of the law. So he blessed them, and was gathered to his fathers. And he died in the 146th year, and his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modin. And all Israel made great lamentation for him. Now it said, so now we understand, now we see the whole thing about the father dying, like we read in the article. Now it says he died in the 146th year. Now what does that mean, the 146th year? Now let's go to the book of First Maccabees, chapter 1. And let's go to First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 10. So we can find that was the 146th year. First Maccabees 1 and 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus or Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus or Antiochus the king. Now Antiochus Epiphanes is Antiochus the fourth. The son of Antiochus the king will be the third. Son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So Antiochus Epiphanes reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Now we got to stop for a second. In order for us to understand what the 146th year is, we got to understand what the 137th year is in the kingdom of the Greeks. Now it says 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. It's not talking about when Alexander began to reign. That's not talking about that. Okay? Because Alexander started to reign in 323 BC. No, 336 BC. So it's not talking about then. What is the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks? Now we know that Antiochus Epiphanes came out of the Seleucid line, because it tells you in the book of First Maccabees 1 and 7, it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death they all put crowns upon themselves, so that their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So different generals put crowns upon their head as rulers. He had many generals, but the 4 primary ones was Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus. Those are the 4 primary ones. And it says, and there came out of them a wicked root. It said, let me continue reading it first. And after this, they all put crowns upon themselves, his generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, and he had many other generals as well. So did their sons after them many years. So, as the years went on, as the generations went on, their sons, their descendants, continued to reign in the stead of their forefathers, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Let's talk about the wars, the wars of the Diadochi, or the wars of the Successors. We went to that last episode, which lasted about 39 years. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus certain Epiphanes. So what root did Antiochus Epiphanes come from? Out of the various generals that Alexander had, what line did he come from? Did he come from the Ptolemaic line? No. Did he come from the Antigonoid line? Because that was another one of the generals, Antigonus? No. Did he come from the line of Lysimachus? No. Did he come from the line of Cassander? No. He came from the line of the Seleucids, the Seleucid line. That is the line that Antiochus Epiphanes came from. So we got to understand, what year did the Seleucid line begin to come about? What year? Let's find that out. Here it goes right here. Britannica.com. Seleucid Dynasty, Macedonian Greek Dynasty, 312 to 64 BC, founded by Seleucus the first Nicator, called from the empire of Alexander the Great. See, right into Maccabees, the first chapter. The Seleucid domain stretched from Thrace to the border of India and included Babylonia, Syria, and Anatolia, also known as Asia Minor. Seleucus was succeeded in 281 by Antiochus the first Sata, who reigned until 261. And even when you read down, it mentions the line of the Antiochus. In fact, I read a little bit more. He was followed by Antiochus II, 261-246. Reigned 261-246. It's talking about BC. Seleucus II, Callinicus, reigned 246-225. Seleucus III, reigned 225-223. And Antiochus III the Great, reigned 223 to 187. Under the last, the empire was at its height. Resistance to the power and spread of Hellenistic culture soon began to manifest itself in the Asian lands. Antiochus III's encounter with the Romans signaled decline, especially after the defeat of 190. The decline accelerated after the death of Antiochus IV, 175, who lost Judea to the Maccabees. So we know the Seleucid line started in 312 BC. So in order for us to know what the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks is, we got to subtract 137 from 132. Let's get a calculator real quick. All right. 312 BC was the beginning of the Seleucid line, started with Seleucus the first Nicator, and we're in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So 1 year from 312 is going to be 311. 2 years is going to be 310. 3 years is going to be 309. So what's going to be 137 years? 312 minus 137 years gives you 175. So Antiochus IV Epiphanes reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks, which is equivalent to what? 170 BC. When you go back to the site, it even tells you that here. See that? The decline accelerated after the death of Antiochus IV. It says it right here. Reign 175, 164. That's not enough? Okay, cool. I'm going to highlight Antiochus IV. Copy it, paste it. Let's see when he reigned. Antiochus IV. Let's check it. We got to check the math. That's how you always did it. In school, right? So-called school. Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Let's see when he began to reign. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, also called Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, Greek god manifest, also called Antiochus or Antiochus Epiphanes the Mad, born circa 215 BCE, died 164, Tibet, Iran, Seleucid king of the Hellenistic Syrian kingdom, who reigned from 175 to 164 BCE. There you go. So now we know what the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks is. 175 BC. But when did Matthias die? Now we're back in 1 Maccabees 2 and 70. It says, and he died in the 146th year. So now do we know that the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks is 175 BC. So what's the 146th year? Let's just subtract that from 312, which is the beginning of the Seleucid line. All we really got to do is just subtract 9 from 175. Because that's what, 137 is 9 less than 146. Because you count backwards. This is BC. 312 minus 146 is 166. So that's when Matthias died, 166 AD. So let's go back. 166 BC. I think I just said AD. BC. And right here, it even tells you right here, in 166 BCE, the father of the family died. We just read that. So now we can go back. Continue reading. Okay. Now we can continue on reading. All right. So it says in 164 BCE, on Kislev 25, that's a so-called Jewish month, the anniversary of the day that the temple was desecrated 3 years previously, the renovation, which would be 167 BCE. In 164 BCE, on Kislev 325, the anniversary of the day the temple was desecrated 3 years previously. As a matter of fact, I think up here it even mentions 167. Yeah, see that? 167 right here. Yep. Mentioned it right there. And we went into that. So let's keep going. Where were we? Okay. In 164 BCE, on Kislev 25, the anniversary of the day that the temple was desecrated 3 years previously, the renovation of the house Hanukkah was celebrated for 8 days. Being thus a substitute for the lapsed festival of the tabernacle, the second temple lacked those artifacts present in the original tabernacle and in the first temple, hence the stress on the golden menorah by the Hasmonean. So let's read a little bit about that Hanukkah. All right, this is the book of First Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 36. And this is, they were battling with these Syrian generals. In the beginning of the chapter, it mentions Gorgias, right here. Gorgias. Gorgias, that's a Syrian general of the Seleucid Empire. And it mentions another general they were battling, who was Lysias. Another Syrian general of the general of the Seleucid Empire, which the Seleucid Empire had reigned in Syria. But one of the and many various other places, of course. So I'm gonna go right to the point. I don't want to read too much. Maybe I'll go into it more in another lesson. But I want to get right to the point. Start from First Maccabees 4:35. Now when Lysias saw that his army was put to flight, and the manliness of Judas' soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profane, and the gates burned up, so they saw all of the turmoil that these armies of their enemies had caused, that these Greeks had caused. And the altar profane, and the gates burnt up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest. So it was like completely left desolate. It was completely left desolate. The abomination that maketh desolate. It says right there, when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned. So you knew they saw unclean animals there, and the gates burnt up and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest. It was desolate. Shrubs was growing there. That's what happens when you leave something untended to. All types of vegetation starts to grow. It's like, you ever seen a house or a parking lot a house that no one lives in. You see the staircases in the side of the building. You start seeing vines and leaves and different stems growing out of it. Or a parking lot that's been abandoned. It's cars in there, but it's been in your neighborhood for 17 years, 30-something years since you was a little kid. And all you see is all kinds of weeds and stuff going up in there. But that's basically how it looked. That's basically how it looked. All right? That's basically how it looked. And it was like that for 3 years. Okay? because this is 164 BCE right here. Really? Yeah, 164 BCE right here. But going back to 167 BC, which you read earlier. So it says where am I? Okay. And shrubs growing in the courts in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, in the priest's chambers, pulled down. They rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew on an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until they had cleansed the sanctuary. So he said, yo, y'all go over there and fight these people over here while we cleanse the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it would be best to pull down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down. So he said, what should we do with the altar? Because, the altar was a holy thing. They said, what do we do with the altar? What are we going to do with this? Are we going to get rid of the altar? They say, we got to get rid of it. It's a reproach to us, man. It's a shameful thing unto us. The heathen had defiled it by offering, swine upon it. So they say, we got to destroy it and laid up the stones in the mountain of the people in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, because the altar according to the scriptures, you wasn't supposed to carve it. Let's get that real quick. This is the book of Exodus chapter 20 verse 25. And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. Meaning you should not supposed to carve into it. Don't hewn it, don't cut the stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. So if you make him an altar of stone, you're not supposed to lift any tool upon it. Okay? That's why when you go back to Maccabees, right here, 1 Maccabees 4:47, it says, then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former. So they took whole stones and they made an altar. They didn't cut any stones. So we're looking at that period of that 1,203 score days, that 3.5 year time period, from when Antiochus came in and started offering a swine on the altar and profaning the temple and profaning the Sabbath up until this point, the rededication of it. Now, some sources are going to say he came and did it in 168 BC. Some sources are going to say 167. But according to the scripture, we know that it's 3.5 years. And we know that that lines up with it. So some may say, it was 167 to 164. Some may say it's 168 to 165. That still will be 3.5 years. For example, the year 2000 to the year 2003, that can be 3.5 years, because January 2000 to January 2003 could be 3 years, but it could be January 2000 instead of January 2003, which would be 3 years. It could be January 2000 to June 2003. That's 3.5 years. It's still 2000 to 2003, but the months make it, the months count. So that 1,203 score days is talking about starting from that period when Antiochus that came in and put the abomination and make it desolate to the point we're reading now. And that's a whole nother lesson. I want to get back to this though. So continuing on, it says, and that's the reason why I said he took men that knew the law. Okay? It said he chose priests of blameless conversation in verse 42. So he chose priests of blameless conversation such as had pleasure in the law. Okay? So let's read on. It says, they took the whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, according to the way it was before, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels into the temple. They brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense in the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the work which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year. So this would be 164. Because remember, if you rewind the video, the 146th year, the 137th year was 175. The 146th year was 166. So the 148th year got to be 164. Like I said, give or take about a year. You know. But we do know Antiochus Epiphanes started to reign in 175. But you know, all these different scholars, some of them may say, oh, it was actually 176, but the majority of the sources say it was 175, because we know the Seleucid dynasty began in 312. So 137 years from there would be 175. But let's continue on. Now, on the 5 and 20th day of the month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law in the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what needed, even in that it was dedicated with songs, cisterns, and harps and cymbals, various instruments. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the power of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and burnt offerings, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates of the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Because, you know, it tells you that the gates was burnt up. Everything was all burnt up. Thus was there great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year, by the space of 8 days, from the 5 and 20th day of the month of Caslu, with birth and gladness. So this is basically the institution of Hanukkah. Now, you're not going to find this in Leviticus. It's like you're not going to find Purim in Leviticus. You're going to find that in the book of Esther. Okay, but these were traditions that our forefathers had kept. At that time also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set their garrison to keep it, and fortified Beth Sura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea, Edom, the Edomites. Gorgias, right here, who was a general. If you go into the history, he was a governor of Idumea. As a matter of fact, it mentions that in the book of I believe Maccabees, the 12th chapter. Let me get that real quick. See if I can find that real quick. Bear with me 1 second. Let's get this real quick. This is Second Maccabees. I thought it was first. Second Maccabees, chapter 12, verse. I just had it. 32. And after the feast called Pentecost, they went forth against Gorgias, the governor of Idumea. So let's go back. Okay. Back at this site here. It says the Hasmonean dynasty was established by Simeon Thassi or Hatarsi. It says reign 142. It says February 135 BCE. Who was the second son of Mattathias. I think I said Matthias earlier, Mattathias or Matthew, the first leader of the revolt. Shimon's name became the most popular Jewish name for centuries, or Simeon, in other words. There's even a man named Simeon in the Gospels. In 141 BCE, a large assembly adopted a resolution, and we read about Simon in First Maccabees, the 2nd chapter already. And it said he was the first leader of the revolt. Let's get a scripture real quick. Right here, this is the book of First Maccabees 5 and 17, and it said, from 16. Now when Judas and the people heard these words, they assembled a great congregation together to consult what they should do for their brethren that were in trouble, and assaulted them. Then said Judas unto Simon his brother, choose thee out men and go and deliver thy brethren that are in Galilee, for I and Jonathan my brother will go into the country of Galaad. So that's why I said he's was the first leader of the revolt. Okay. So back here it says in 141 BC, a large assembly adopted a resolution of the priests and the people, the elders of the land, to the effect that Simon should be their leader and priest forever until there shall arise a faithful prophet. 2 years later, the new state was recognized by the Roman Republic. Alright, so I'm going to get into that on the next lesson. Okay, so that I'm going to close. I'm going to say, oh, praise Yahweh, Shemel, Shah, to the Apostle GMS. I hope you learn something. Till next time, Shalom.